Well, welcome back to the Menopause Movement Podcast. We've got Deirdre Fay joining us today. Deirdre is a licensed clinical social worker, the author of Attachment-Based Yoga and Meditation for Trauma Recovery, co-author of Attachment Disturbances in Adults. I didn't get a chance to read it. I got a chance to skim it, and it looks very, very intense. It's a psychology textbook, which is in and of itself a chore for me anyway. And
I try to simplify it.
Yeah. And then the author of a Becoming Safely Embodied Skills Manual. She's let's see, what else do we have here?
Well, the BSE, the Becoming Safely Embodied Skills, are now used around the world by individuals and groups and therapists and teachers. They're just really succinct little simple skills to help people actually live in their body instead of just thinking about their lives and getting all caught in the ruminations.
Oh, that's great. So a couple other things. The book Attachment Disturbances in Adults won a bunch of awards. I saw that on on Amazon, and it was like in 2017 or something. It won like the highest award that you can get in a textbook, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And
in the field of trauma and attachment, right?
In the field of trauma and attachment. So this is interesting. Simple skills. So this book is used to help people get some tools to manage their trauma and their wounding and to live in their skin. And that's an interesting thing because I have some trauma in my background that we can get into. She lived for 6.5 years in a yoga ashram where she learned the profound practices of meditation and body presence. And that's cool. So, Deirdre, I'm happy to have you here. I'm just trying to see if there's anything else we want to say. She marries contemporary thought with ancient wisdom traditions and allows people to access what feels true to them while having harmonious relationships. And she's got a quiz that you can take. It's called What's Your Relationship Profile? And we'll link that up in the show notes. So I'm excited to have you here. This is really, really great because, we're women going through menopause. And one of the things I think that happens to us as we age and go through menopause is we start to get to a point of like, is this all? I was talking about this on one of my Facebook Lives recently. Is this all there is? And what's next for me? And that was, something that happened for me. And one of the stories I like to tell people is I had spent all this time and energy getting through my surgical residency. And it was like the main focus. And even like the energy healers would come to me and say, man, you've got a horn in the front of your head because I was just really focused. And when I started my practice, I remember there was I have this emotional memory of just sitting in my office saying, well, I'm not happy. It didn't happen. Why am I not happy? And is this all there is? And so helping to find meaning was really important for me. In terms of relationship and attachment, I'd like to hear from you, like what that means, especially since, like many of us, by the time we've reached this age, we've been through at least one divorce and some multiple divorces or multiple relationships. I'd like to hear from you about let's start with how you got into attachment and what that means.
It's a big subject, so let me condense. So when I was living at the yoga ashram, it was such a safe environment. It was a wonderful cocoon of safety, living with all these people, 300 and some odd people, in a really safe environment, doing a lot of spiritual practice. And during that time, it's just what spiritual practices are supposed to do. They opened up all that was unfinished in me. And that happened to me, my own trauma history, which I had kind of compartmentalized off, dissociated from it, didn't really think about its impact on me. So that just came flooding to the surface. And so that became my work. I started looking at this and working in it. Went to school, then worked with Bessel van der Kolk in his clinic. How do you put all these great wisdom tradition practices into experience when your body is shot and you're overwhelmed and you're triggered all the time? And so I really started working at that really basic level. And then
wait. What basic level? I'm already lost. So
it's good for me to slow down. So Let's say, and this doesn't have to be from a trauma trigger. Whenever we're triggered, what happens? Our whole body goes, right? And we're lost in it. We're completely captivated by what that trigger is.
So let's just talk about triggers for a second, because this is like, well, it's almost like a new concept for me. And I think, how come it's a new concept?
Yeah, tell me about that.
Because I never really heard that term. So maybe it's a big term in the psychology circles, and I think it's also big now with millennials. It's a big, you hear it from the millennials. And I can think of many instances where I was triggered and reacted inappropriately, because one of the ways that I managed my own trauma was to not to trust anyone, and to always push people away. And then if I felt threatened at all, I would just lash out. Right. That was one of my and as I've grown up, I've realized that, but it took me, I almost lost my job when I was a resident because I didn't know how to interact with people. So this is like, going back to the trauma of my childhood and not really learning the coping skills that were necessary. And it's probably common, and thankfully I got to a place where I had the luxury to do some self, introspection, where a lot of women may not have that, because we're, many people are still in survival mode, even into menopause. So just to talk about, what a trigger is, let's just define that to start.
Well, a trigger can be two things. It can be you're either overreactive, like lashing out, or you're collapsing in and withdrawing.
Okay.
And that's where the beautiful connection between attachment theory is, because attachment styles are based, I hate to say it, just on those very simple things. If you have a safe enough relationship, you're going to feel safe to go out into the world, because you know that when something happens, because something will happen, that you have safe people to return to that are going to be soothing and reassuring and calming and let you know the world's okay. So that's the basic of a secure attachment. What the research shows across the Western world is that 1 out of 4 people has a secure attachment. Well, what does that mean? That means that the rest of us don't.
So, all right. So let's define secure attachment.
Come back to it. Well, what I say is that there are 7 fundamental attachment needs.
Okay.
Knowing that you're safe with other people, safe in your own skin. So that's one. Knowing that you can get reassurance and calming, having somebody attuned to you, knowing that you can attune to other people, be aware of them. It's an empathic skill. Being able to be empathic and attuned to your own what's going on inside your own body, instead of avoiding it. Knowing about guidance and mentoring, being able to have somebody who can take you through small, simple steps, being able to be with conflict and repair the conflict so the relationship gets stronger over time and doesn't fall apart. Having ease of well-being in the body or with people or with life. Not taking life personally. These are all some of the simple attachment needs that we all have. And if we don't have them met, that's where things get messy. When things don't get repaired, we get disrupted inside. Now, it's one thing for you and I, menopausal women, right, to be able to think about things and reflect on it. But if you're a youngster and these attachment styles are laid down before we're 3 years old, before we have capacity to narrate our life, it's just a felt experience. So when it's laid down that low, that young, then it gets encoded as body memory, or felt experience, and it's not cognized. And so one of the things that happens is, as we're growing up, we kind of push away all those sensations that don't make sense or we don't know what to do with or are overwhelming, and we build a self on top of that. But then we feel split inside. We're like, why? Why is this happening? How come life doesn't fit the way I want, right?
Yeah.
Part of what you're describing, what I describe, it's just life. And so part of our task is being able to be attuned to ourselves so that we can make sense of our inner world and put the pieces back together. And then choose how we want to be in this life, in this time, in this relationship. And that's what gets complicated. But I'll draw you a little, if we think about triggers, this is what seems to make the most sense for people. So here we are in, say, 2019. So we all have memories. Now, this is not how memory is actually encoded in the mind or in the body. But here we are doing our regular thing. And we've got all this stored stuff. Now, some of this stored stuff is really highly charged. And so when we're here and somebody says, gosh, Michelle, why did you do that? And you have, as hard as you work, a lot of stuff down here in the past that's like charged. When this happens in 2019, it's going to immediately associate, not even nanoseconds.
Yeah.
So quick with this. And if this is so charged and unable to be contained, this is going to pop into, the word sounds so simple. It explodes into this present moment in 2019. And we think it blows up in 2019. And we're no longer thinking, oh, there's a nice past experience. No, it's all happening now. And we get crazy.
Does this, so are you saying that, okay, so just so I understand, are you saying that this can be something that we've hidden from ourselves, that all of a sudden we're remembering because of some sort of an experience that, obviously triggers it, but brings something that's been really, really pushed down into the up to the surface? Is that what you're saying is happening? And so what was something that maybe our psyches have pushed down as a protection mechanism, and then all of a sudden, either through a positive where we've been working, like what happened with you at the ashram, or through a negative, somebody pushing us in a way that's uncomfortable, these memories are coming up. Is it always memories, or can it be?
Well, we think about memories as something that we can cognize and understand. But what if it's just like this felt oozing, this like sense of like, I have a lot of people say, I wake up in the morning and I'm really anxious or depressed. But why? When you wake up in the morning, nothing has changed.
Right.
Except that you're tapping into a state. So often it's really helpful for people to reflect on when you're waking up in that state, what's that anxiety? You have to link it back. You have to, it's like a big puzzle piece. You have to put all the pieces together. Where would this have felt like this before?
In the morning.
Usually there's some similarity, but sometimes it doesn't have to be.
I see.
You have to play around in the field, and it's more of an art than a science. It's not like there's anything specific, but something will rise to the surface.
I see.
Now, not to go too far off track, but this is where the beautiful intersection with the ancient wisdom traditions is because they say that consciousness is clean and clear, but that we have these imprints on us. And what we're imprinted with stays with us, and it stays with it as a thought, a body sensation, an interaction of some kind. So that's in the spiritual world. But if we think about it from an attachment perspective, if somebody has a mother or father or caregiver that doesn't attune to them and lets them cry by themselves, that leaves us an impression in our system. And it's out of those simple little things that we build what's called a representation. It's how we then see the world. And that lens that we see the world then kind of predetermines how our relationships in life will be. And the research is that if for many teenagers, I think it's 77% of teenagers, those early attachment representations, those impressions on our system, actually live out later in life. Like 77%. If you have this attachment, you're going to have that later in life, unless you change it.
Right. But that requires some deep inner work to change it.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I want to say I want to avoid the word deep only because I don't want it to make it so scary for people. It's
sure.
It's a process, and it is a system, but we can change.
Yeah. Well, so I just want to make an example. So one of the things I learned, actually, I was at one of the James Wedmore's conferences back in April. And one of the things that he said really, really struck me, and it was, if you were traumatized as a child and you're still living as a victim, are you going to let a child run your life for the rest of your life? Exactly. And I was like, and I had worked, I was really brutally sexually traumatized as a child. And I've talked about this a lot and in my Facebook lives, and it's going to come out in my memoir that's hopefully going to come out in May. But I was brutalized. It was so brutal that there's a whole year of my life I don't remember. I actually have a physical memory of waking up and in 5th grade. And so what I find fascinating about that was that, I worked through it and I realized that, one of the main things for me was forgiveness, and that forgiveness was for me, and it didn't matter, what those other people, whether they accepted my forgiveness or not, that I was going to get free of them from that. But it's easy to kind of get stuck in this whole feeling of, victimhood, and think that, you're doing, I was like, I'm doing this because this, and this happened to me when I was little. And to get to a point where, like, you know what, I'm responsible for my own actions. It has nothing to do with what this guy or that guy, or maybe that priest, I don't remember, did to me. It has to do with, how I just choose to take my life going forward.
Right.
And what's really funny, I'm a surgeon, right? I have a surgical practice. I employ 3 other surgeons besides myself, and a support team of about 7 or 8, maybe more. And I've always felt like a chronic underachiever. So this is, I'm probably a perfect candidate.
Underachiever, it's down in here.
Probably, yeah.
And what happens is we don't link these two together. So we live these, what I call parallel lives. Here, you're doing all what you're doing, pretty amazing stuff. And here it's like, oh my God, I'm not good enough. I'm not, whatever it is. Run it. And this part is living this way instead of interacting. And so the task really is, how do we stay here, access this, dip our toe into this, make sense of it, and help this part see through our eyes here. And that starts changing things.
Right. So when you do that, and that's what you do through your programs.
That's what I do with everything. That's what I do with myself. It's a constant practice, because we're retraining. And this is what I love about the wisdom traditions. They talk about training the mind, not just the mental mind, but the heart mind.
Right.
Train ourselves to move in the direction we want to go, rather than being overwhelmed by it.
So would you say that one of the key components to getting, I guess, free of triggers or understanding ourselves is like some sort of a spiritual practice?
Well, from my point of view, there's not much difference between life and spiritual practices.
Okay.
Life is exactly this. Life is, in yoga, we talk about how what has an acorn turn into an oak tree? Right? It's that life force energy.
Mm-hmm.
So that life force energy is streaming through us all the time. It has no choice. That's what it does.
Right.
But it hits up against these blocks, these little, what I call time capsules in us. So when we get activated inside, we're getting hit with, in yoga, we call it a samskara. The life force is coming up and hitting the samskara. And the life force's only goal is to bring us freedom, to bring us home to ourselves. So that life force is coming up and hitting this samskara, saying, honey, I just want to clean this out of the way. I want you to be free. But we're in that samskara, in that one. We're like, right?
I'm certain that many of my followers will relate to that, because it's so easy to, it's just so easy to, I mean, life happens and it can be so messy, and then we go, and so we push up against it. And the thing is that, I do talk a lot. So I had this whole period in my life where I was like atheist/agnostic. And last year or the year before, I read Autobiography of a Yogi.
Oh, cool.
And it changed everything for me. And so now, I mean, like, I don't know if you've seen my Facebook Lives, but I'm going through the Self-Realization Fellowship lessons, and I get one of these every 2 weeks. And this is lesson 6, and it's all about movement to like get the life force going. And it's like 36 or 38 movements that like is supposed to help move the energy. I don't know. I whatever. But what I find.
Whatever. It can be really powerful.
Yeah. But what I find really fascinating for me is that, I've never really liked yoga. I think yoga hurts. I'm overweight, so I've got a big belly. I have to breathe against it, and it's frustrating, and so it's interesting to hear Yogananda talk about this Kriya yoga, right? Like, what is that? What is that? I want to know that. I want to have that connection with God, so that, and not so much that I want to have superpowers, because I don't care about superpowers. I just want to feel secure.
Exactly.
And so what I do,
and at ease.
Yeah. And so what I do in my meditation is I'm like, okay, God, reveal yourself. And so the other day I had a brief glimpse, and it was really weird. I was like, my eyes were closed, and all of a sudden it was like looking through, like a forest of bamboo into a light. And it was like that. And then I came right back, because I was like, oh, what is that?
Right.
But the point is, and this is what I try to tell people, is like, a spiritual practice is going to set you free. And even if you don't believe in God or a super force or something, there is energy. And we know that quantum physics explains that we're everything is constantly moving. And if we can get into the right vibration, anything is available to us. Right. And so, what I like to say is, if you don't believe in a God or a supreme being or energy, whatever, if you just sit for 20 minutes with your eyes closed and focus on your breathing, everything is going to calm down for you. It doesn't matter, because it's going to, get your nervous system better, So I guess the next question I would have for you is, how do we look at our, we've talked about triggers now. So let's talk about what are, I guess, attachments, right? So attachments, are you talking about like, the two phases of separation where we're really attached to our parents, and then, or?
No, when we talk about attachment representations, the research, and this is like the gold standard everywhere, is that there are 4 main attachment styles. And one is a secure, where you pretty much think about it, you can just let life roll off your back. You're at ease in the world. You feel secure in yourself. Then there's the attachment style that I call permeable. In the literature, we call it anxious or preoccupied. It's all about, I got to figure out what's going on out there, so that I work it out, make it all okay out there, so that I feel good in here. And
that's like the control freak.
Well, we can control in many different ways. I can try to control you out there and control the circumstances of life out there, because I don't feel safe inside myself.
Okay.
The other style would be somebody that's dismissive, or we call it more contained. Somebody that's like, okay, I'm not going to get involved. I'm okay by myself. I don't need anybody. I'm fine. But what that person loses out on is the interconnection, the relationships. And for some reason, this person keeps pushing people away, and people get upset or feel rejected or dismissed or made wrong. So those are the 2 extremes. And then there's this 4th style called the disorganized attachment, which is all over the place. It can be multiple things. And what we also see is, depending on where you are on the spectrum, this part here might be dismissive, and this part here might be anxious. So it depends on what part is taking over the scene.
Sure.
Now, some of us have a more predominant style, and some of us have a mixture. The whole idea of being free is being able to stay more in 2019, or this current present moment, being able to say, like, wow, look at how that part is like taking over the show here. Man, is this what I want? Who do I want to be right now? Okay.
Yeah. So we talk a lot about, how you can't fail the present moment. How the,
actually in this.
Yeah. You cannot fail now. You can, there's things are going to happen, they're good things or bad things. We don't know, but if you can stay, and it's hard, every once in a while you get into this flow where you can be present, and then what happens is you can actually learn to become the observer. But it's hard. The Michael Singer book, right? Have you read it?
Yeah, he taught us back in the day.
The Untethered Soul. Like who is listening to the voice, right? And And so, and Adyashanti, who wrote a book called Pure Meditation, right? True meditation. And when you really get down to what it is just like awareness, right. And that's our connection with the cosmic consciousness. And then it starts to get really weird, and then I start to feel like, oh, I'm thinking like a philosopher, and I don't like how I feel when I think that way. So, but yeah, it's a really interesting place to be in trying to understand ourselves, right? I mean, that's what this is all about. I mean, we're all in a place where, we come from wherever we come from into these bodies, and the goal is to, kind of reconnect with God. At least that's what Yogananda said, right? We're on this quest to reconnect with God, and if we want to do this self-discovery, getting to a point where we can see what all these things mean. Does that make sense? Am I making any sense at all?
Yes.
Okay.
And, to go back to your meditation where you saw this light and then you pulled back.
Yeah.
What spiritual practices are all designed to do is to ease ourselves and calm our system so that when we reach those moments, we, instead of retracting, freezing, we go into it.
Yeah.
And that going into it is the process of letting go over and over and over again in our daily life, so that when that happens, we can be one. Yoga is about becoming one with all that is.
Yeah.
So I was like, how can we sink into that moment?
Yeah, it was really different. And I think because I was like, one of the things that Yogananda says in the very first lesson, he says, you need to go after God like a drowning man goes after a buoy, right? Reveal yourself. And so then it was like, oh, I finally got it. It's like a trigger. It's kind of funny. I mean, I was super, super religious as a teenager. I was like in the born again Christian, thing. And we, in the 80s, it was really weird because we would like pray for people. And then like my phone was disconnected from the wall and was still ringing. And we had some really like weird supernatural stuff happen back in the 80s. And it's funny because my friend Naomi said, I want an explanation for those times, because it was like really weird, psychically, spiritually strange times. And then I kind of let it all go because I had to come to grips with the fact that I am a lesbian. And when I was with the Christian religion, I was with them, that was not okay. And I went through a whole ex-gay, thing. And, it was, but it was really a hard lesson for me to have to go through. And so I kind of rejected all Christianity because of this belief that the Christians put. But now that I understand a little bit better that religion is really the people trying to control other people, and it isn't really the spiritual person, So what else can we how can we help? If somebody's like noticing that they're getting triggered, and maybe not necessarily through a meditation, but maybe through an interaction with their spouse or something, how can we help them improve their relationship?
Gosh, there's so many steps to it. One is being able to step back from the moment,
be the observer.
Yeah. I can remember once being really triggered and walking for an hour, just saying I'm just triggered. I'm triggered. Just naming it. We know from the research that being able to name something, we call it mindfulness as well, it helps externalize and create calmness. So just being able to name it. Okay, I'm triggered. Don't make it about the content. Just say, I'm triggered. Take a break. Let your nervous system calm down.
Mm-hmm.
Do any kind of technique. Go for a run. Take a deeper breath. Punch a bag. Whatever helps you just diffuse your energy. That's key. Step away from it. It's not about now. And one of the things I say to people, if it's this bad now, just imagine what it was like back then, when that activation, that representation was imprinted on you. That you're feeling it now when you have all the resources and capabilities you do now, but you didn't have it back then. So you're getting a glimpse, a tiny little window into how bad it was for us back in the day and why we had to shut it all down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That brings in a lot of self-compassion. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So that brings perspective, and all these things help to slow down the trigger and give some room. And then if you can talk about it, but if you can't, take some time, write about it, draw about it, dance it out. What is it in there that's creating havoc? It's not about there as much. We only want to make it out there. We have all our favorite tendencies: blaming, criticizing, judging. Everything's wrong out there, but the reality is it's in here that's activated.
Right. Well, I think also one of the big techniques and something that has really helped me is to realize that those are just thoughts, right? Those are not our identity. They're not who we are. And I like to tell my followers and people that one of the best techniques is something that I learned from Sri Kumar Rao, which is the pause. And it's just 10 deep breaths.
Right.
So when you start to feel that coming on, you take 10 deep breaths, and what that's going to do is it's just going to calm your nervous system and give you a break.
Right.
But we talk a lot about about identity and who we really are. And what happens is we're so body centric and we're so mind centric. And once we start to realize that there's more than just the thoughts that we have and the body that we are, then we can move forward. And when you have a belief is just a sentence that you say over and over and over in your head, right? And once we realize that everything that we believe can change, it's just a story.
Right.
And what happened for me, and one of the things that was very helpful for me was that, okay, so I was a little girl and I was abused, and that little girl did whatever she could to protect herself.
Right.
But that's not me now. And I don't have to work from that hurt little girl, because now I'm an adult who can see it objectively. Now, I'm not going to say that I don't suffer from it, because, when with sexual abuse, it's hard to have a normal adult sexuality, life when that happens. But some people get through it. But so I'm not going to say that I'm through it all, because, I've got stuff to work on too. It's never going to go away. But I can at least see it as, that little girl did whatever she could to stay away. And what I find really fascinating is that the whole idea was to push down my spirit. I had so much spirit. I was always as the one who got back on the horse. I was the one who got up when you pushed me down. And it's almost, I don't know, I wonder who I would be if it hadn't happened, because I have so much tenacity and so much perseverance that, I will work at anything until it's done. I will just, I just keep going like a dog with a bone. and it's kind of funny, because if you, did you see Tony Robbins' Netflix special?
No.
All right. So on that Netflix special, the I Am Not Your Guru, he says, I had a bad childhood, but I'm so grateful for that, because it made me the man I am. And so I'm almost there. I don't know if I can say that I'm grateful for the fact that I was brutalized, but I'm thankful that I don't remember it all now. If I were to remember it all, and I might before I die, and I might not, but I think that it would be a traumatic.
Right.
So for anybody else who's like that, like there are plenty of women who follow me who have, when you look at the statistics, it's 1 out of 4 and probably closer to 1 out of 2 girls who are, or any women who are sexually molested in this country, and maybe even throughout the world. So for somebody who has, something like me, has a repressed memories or anything like that, what are your recommendations for that?
You've already said something of them. I think in my office, what I see the most is that learning how to separate out the past from the present, being able to stay in this moment, identify with this moment. And even when I've worked with the most severely dissociated and in a group and had them name how do you know when you're in the present moment? They actually can name it,
Okay.
Talk about seeing things, in perspective, not having black and white thinking. they feel a sense of ease and well-being. They naturally know that state. But the other stuff, that's where this model comes in so helpful, this parallel lives, is these states occlude. They keep us from seeing the present moment. But when you begin to separate that out and say, oh, here I am in this moment, pausing, slowing down, doing whatever we can to walk away from the activation, that helps the body calm. Then you have more perspective. And
Sure.
then you can choose. Knowing that the past is invading the present is a key thing, both in attachment work and in trauma. When you know that this past is coming in, then you can say, okay, wow, that's happening. How do I move away? So those are key things.
There's a book I read. I started reading. I don't think I finished it, by David Richo, I think. When the past is present.
Mm-hmm. I haven't read that one, right? Yeah,
but he wrote a really good book called How to Be an Adult in Relationships. And there's like 5, pillars of how to be an adult in a relationship. And I was, Hal Elrod wrote this book called The Miracle Morning, right? And so I read that book several years ago. And part of my morning routine of when I was doing Miracle Morning was to read a book for 20 minutes. That was part of the deal. And so I read this really hard book, this How to Be an Adult in a Relationship, 20 minutes at a time, because, man, that's have you read that book?
Yeah. But it's the reason it's hard, it's bringing up all this stuff.
Yeah. And then he wrote this book out, When the Past is Present. And I thought, that might be helpful for me. And then I just, I could be an adult and read this book. But I didn't finish it. But, one of the things is that I've found, there's a couple things I want to go into, but one thing that I found, that if you have a hard book, so I'll just give this little tip. If you have a hard book, the way to do it is to read it in, take set a timer, 10 or 15 minutes, and read, and then stop. And then, it probably took me 3 months to read that book, but I would have never read it otherwise.
Right.
And it was a really helpful book. But I wanted to go back and talk to you for a second about dissociation or dissociative behavior, and kind of what that means. Because remember, my audience is not medical and it's not psychology. For the most part, it's just, ladies living their lives. And so I want to understand what that means, what dissociation is, and what brings it on, and that sort of thing.
Well, we have typical dissociation. If I'm busy, my mind is crazy, and I go downstairs and where did I put that? Happened the other day. I went to the massage therapist. I didn't have my check. I thought I brought the check. Where did I? Oh my God, where is it? That's just a simple everyday dissociation.
That's not brain fog. It sounds like brain fog.
You can call it brain fog.
It sounds like a menopause symptom.
There's that whole spectrum of dissociation, from the very ordinary.
Yeah.
What you described earlier on, when you woke up and you said, oh my God, I finally woke up. There was something you said.
Yeah, I was in 5th grade. When I woke up, I was like, what happened last year?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So what happened last year? So that's on the further end of dissociation. When we think about, there's many ways that can show up, where we literally forget we did something, or some part of us takes over something that we don't know about. So there's all that whole spectrum.
Okay.
But the more we normalize it, really all it's trying to do is, dissociation is trying to help us cope with life. And there's a good way to do it. Like you're being able to, and all of us being able to put our stuff in the past and say, I'm not going to deal with it right now. That's dissociation. Not bad. But what do we do later on? Do we incorporate it? Do we bring it back, and do we link it back up? Like, even if you're reading a book that's hard, during that 20 minutes, read a little bit. When you feel your body get activated, slow down, write what's activating, what's going on in here. Not just in the book. Start naming and labeling what's going on in here. And doing this process of disidentifying, I am not that. Because when we get activated, our nervous system takes over, and we're like, oh my God, this is me. It's right.
Right. Changing our identity to, yeah.
Right. Flip right there. So our task is, okay, wow, it's not happening now. This is, this is a trigger. I'm activated. Let me see what I can find out about that, rather than being the trigger.
So in terms of like recognizing when we're triggered, what do you think is the best skill that we could give our audience today to recognize what's happening? I mean, like what a trigger is, or, and how to see and then give, like I'd like to give, the women who are watching, and the men, tools that like when they, because this may be the very first time that they're actually seeing, this may be like a huge aha for a lot of women about, oh my God, this is what's been happening like for the last 30 years. Right. So what's some tool that we can give them? Number one, to recognize how, how they're being triggered. And number two, just a tool to kind of come back into who they are.
Let me give you another little drawing then.
Great.
If we, what we're trying to do always is we live within what we call a window of tolerance. This is the research of Dan Siegel.
Okay.
If we live in this window of tolerance, then we can deal with whatever goes through here, right? But let's say we get activated or something bad happened. We literally start narrowing that window. We live in a smaller, and our task is actually to open up that window of tolerance, to be able to tolerate way more than we could back here. That's how to become an adult. This is really the process of being an adult. And if we have good enough caregiving, somebody's going to be, oh, honey, it's all right. It's just a dream. It's just a dream. You can go back to sleep. Calming and reassuring. We're like, oh, I can handle it. We can let life roll through us. Now, if we can't, when something happens, we're like here, right? We're all freaked out. Well, how do we get ourselves back? We have to breathe, slow down, enter this. And then over time, we get activated. We reach this little level and we think, okay, I'm triggered. I'm activated. This is horrible. I want to get back in here. I want to get into this optimal zone. Or if I'm shut down, how do I okay, I need a break. I need to just come back into here. So there's many ways that people do it, but this is an ideal way of looking at it.
So, but it starts with awareness.
Right.
It starts with awareness. And I think one of the best ways to learn how to become aware is to actually take the time to meditate or to sit.
Slow down.
Yeah.
Madeline L'Engle used to say the best thing we can do is just keep a daily journal. Just write. You're then observing what's going on in life.
That's true.
Meditation is a great thing, but if you can't slow it down, I'm going to be doing a course in the fall we call Living Untriggered, looking at the 4 components of meditation: self-compassion, mindfulness, being able to concentrate, being able to be with non-duality, be with nothingness, and know that we're all one. But that piece about concentration, if I'm triggered up, I need to be able to go where I want to go instead of being pulled by all these pieces. So I have to cultivate that capacity to focus. You had that early on. That's a native quality of yours. You came into this lifetime with that. That's easy for you. For many people, it's not.
So what? Tell me more about your course that you're teaching.
I teach a bunch of them, but the one that's coming up will be Living Untriggered, and it really just goes through these 4 different segments, weaving together all the pieces to help people live an untriggered life.
And is that a live course?
It'll be live, and we have a whole curriculum for it, and we've done it for years. It's really what came out of all the work that I did on my own life.
That's great. When is it?
I think we've set up
it's coming up
in October, November.
Oh, okay. All right. And so in terms of your live course, where is it? Where do you have the courses?
We do them online. I teach a lot nationally and internationally live courses, but the online courses are everywhere. We have people from around the world in them. Okay, so the course that you have coming up is going to be online but live? Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. So anybody from anywhere can sign up as long as they can get there at a time, during the time.
Coaching along the way to help people really put it into practice.
Okay. Sure. So there's the opportunity to work with you in terms of your online live courses, and then also there is an opportunity for live coaching, one-on-one coaching with you, kind of similar to what we're doing right now.
People in the community who've done the course and really used the skills, so it gets more, real.
Right. So you have a community of people who've gone through your courses, and then they kind of self-coach each other and that sort of thing. Yeah, that's always really, really nice to see. And you have a quiz, right?
We do, the relationship profile.
So can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. It's dfay.com/profile.
Well, we'll link it up. We'll link it up in the show notes. So we'll make sure that they can get to it from the show. But
it's really looking at these different relationship profiles and what are the benefits and drawbacks, because each of them has their benefit and drawback, and just giving you more awareness so that you have more access to yourself.
Yeah.
And do the other steps to help you change the way you interact in the lives that you have with yourself and with other people.
So the self-discovery is like what your relationship type is, and then how you can interact with other people.
Exactly.
That's cool. Well, I think I want to have you back. I think that
yeah, I'm totally thrilled to talk to you. It's great.
Yeah, no, this has been really good. Connection. I'm just really glad that you came and spoke to us today, and I'm excited to kind of delve into this a little bit more. I'm probably going to buy one of your books and try and read it with the 20 minutes. See, it's funny. I'm reading this book right now called Self-Directed Behavior. Have you heard of that one? It's another psychology textbook. I'm actually using it in my membership to help the women do behavior change. And so I'm actually going through parts of it, like, how to beat procrastination, how to change, if you want to change some sort of behavior. And it's a really fantastic book. And I've found that there's so many good nuggets in it that it's really good for my members who've gone through my course.
Self-directed what?
Self-directed behavior. But anyway, this is a really good book, and I think that I can use some of your, I read your books and probably use some of your techniques as well in the membership.
Definitely the BSE, the Becoming Safe in Body. I'll send that out today. Get my team to send that to you.
Sure.
As well. And they're so simple that for years I thought, what good does this do anyone? I know it changed my life and it's helping people. But the fact that that's what it is, and we think about it when I learned about attachment theory and think about guidance and mentoring, what that is all about is how do we scale something, take tiny steps so that somebody can put the scaffolding inside. And that's what these skills do, just simple little things.
Well, that goes back to constant never-ending improvement, right? And Kaizen, where you just want to get 1%, and then, what our mentor Ryan likes to say is, what's the next step that we can do that is so small that it's impossible to fail.
Exactly.
And so we get, the whole idea is to get to a point where we're in this space of constant never ending improvement. I like to tell people that, the women who follow me every Monday, I say, okay, what are you going to do this week? What are 3 things that you're going to do that's going to move you closer to your goal so that you are happening to your week and to your day and to,
watching your lives. That's how you do that.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. So every week I do that so that, because, one of the things that I think that it takes time for us to really understand is that our whole life happens here. It may seem like it's happening out there, but everything out there is a dream, and everything that really happens is what's happening in between our heads. And that's where we have control, and we can change the narrative. We can change our stories. So if you don't like what's happening, if you don't like your life, if you're complaining a lot, what you can do is you can look at your stories and see, is that story serving me? And if it's not, then change it. There's a few things that we can't change. We can't change the fact that gravity sucks. We can't change that. Things are going to fall at 9.8 meters per second squared. That's a universal law. But we also have universal laws like the law of attraction. And if we can get into the right vibratory space, anything that we want or need is going to come to us. That is another law. But we have to take the steps that's necessary. We have to do the work to get to that space. And that's where, I think like looking at attachment and looking at where we're triggered and things like that can really help us. So,
and if you don't do that, you're going to keep attracting the old stuff.
Exactly. Well, Esther Hicks likes to say, you got to find out what you don't want so you know what you do want, right? That's what she likes to say. And well, I don't love Esther Hicks. I do. There's a couple things she says that I do like, but for the most part, I'm still very skeptical about channeling some sort of being. So I still have my own skepticisms as a scientist. But anyway, I want to be mindful of time. So thank you, Deirdre, for coming on. We're gonna hook up all of your books and your quiz in our show notes so that the audience can go ahead and get involved. So I really appreciate you coming on today, and we'll have you back hopefully soon.
You're the best.
All right. Thanks a lot. All right.
Bye.